All right, tonight we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. This is the only verse we're going to deal with because, as I told Miss Christie before church started, I think this verse deals with the number one problem in America today. But when I became a man part's not happening. The but when I became a man part seems to be lost in our nation today. 9% of the problems I deal with is because men won't live up to their responsibility. I'm sorry, guys, but you just don't find that many cases where the guys are real industrious and hardworking and churchgoers and just doing the best they can, and the woman's slacking. It's always the other way. Always the other way. And the church is as responsible for this as anybody. When we started the era of everybody's got to play, when we started the era of if you touch my little boy, I'm going to sue. When we started the era, if my little boy don't want to eat what I prepared, I'll take time to fix whatever it is he wants to eat. When we started the era of my little boy gets catered to whatever he wants to have, is when we started the downfall of this nation. And now we have a nation full of young men who their great desire in life is to play video games like they were 8 years old. The biggest customer of the video game industry is not the children. It's grown people who sit and twiddle away hours of productive life in an adolescent behavior and attitude. Well, I suppose this isn't the only time in history when this has been an issue, but it's a glaring issue today, and the church needs to start doing something about it. I think one of the things the church needs to do is start getting serious about people's lives instead of just telling the same little old stories over and over and making sure that what they say doesn't impact. It's been said of me that I'm opinionated. Well, I don't know how you could be a real preacher and not be opinionated. What are you going to preach about if you don't have an opinion? What are you going to do? Just read the words that's written in the book? And then make sure when you do your sermon that it can't possibly offend any living human being? How will that cause anybody to be blessed? I think the church is responsible for a lot of the ills in America today because we have become to the point, we ourselves, the church itself is still a child and has to be fed milk. Most people think good preaching is emotionalism. They think good preaching is when the preacher looks like he's lost his mind and running around and going crazy and screaming and yelling and all of that. Well, I've seen some who can preach that way and give you meat, but most don't. Most time it's just jumping up and down and running around and yelling. Now, I believe in passion. Paul said, I came in demonstration of power in the Spirit. But power wasn't a booming voice. Power was healing bodies. I know I'm probably talking about myself a little bit, but reality is reality. When he says I came in demonstration of power, it wasn't that he was so mighty in his preaching. As a matter of fact, he says, my preaching is not even eloquent. It's poor. It's simple. But you could tell I was in the Spirit because when I touched the blind eye, they could see. When I touched the deaf ear, they could hear. When I touched the lame leg, they could walk. And when I touched the leper, they were cleansed. That's the power that Paul is talking about. So what good is it if I come in here and swing from the chandeliers like a yard ape and you walk out the door the same way you came in? That goes for me and anybody else that steps in the pulpit. The church has gotten to the point where it says, we got an idea of what we'd like, and if you do what we like, we'll support you. And if you don't do what we like, then we're not going to bother with you. Now, what the church should have said was, look, I hope you all can hear this and not get angry. I got to thinking about this. I've been thinking about it all week long. God don't need anybody. We need God. But it's been positioned as of late as if God needs us. Now, I'm blessed to be saved. It wasn't a right. God wasn't obligated to save me. He's not the one that caused me to sin or fall. And so therefore, I ought to be extremely blessed. And what needs to happen is the church needs to say to those people that want to hear it their way, look, you got the choice. It's your soul that's going to be damned, and you need to decide, do you need it buttered or do you need it right? And when you think about this verse, and this, don't you think it's weird that Paul puts this in the love chapter? Now, this whole chapter has been about love till he gets to this point. And I think this is the culmination of the thought. I can't love you as a child. I got to become a man before I can love you. As a child, how many times have you seen children tell you they love you in one breath and 3 minutes later they hate you? Because it didn't go the way they wanted it to go. But when a man says he loves you, that should mean something. That should be reality. You should be able to count on it. You should be able to depend upon it. It should be real. It shouldn't be just empty words in order to manipulate a moment, but it should be the foundation of strength that another individual can live and rejoice in knowing that there is someone that will hold on to them. I mean, that's what Jesus said when he said he loved us. So the verse goes like this: when I was a child, which hints that Paul doesn't think he's a child any longer. I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Now, I made a little comment Sunday morning that I intended to be funny. Didn't many of you laugh, so I guess it wasn't. But I said if I saw anybody over the age of 12 trick-or-treating, I was going to spank them. And nothing hardly infuriates me more than to see grown teenage boys out doing that. 16, 17, 18 years old, out playing the fool. If you want candy, go to the store and buy some. But leave that to the little bitty kids because their motive is totally different. It's a different concept. I know when I was 12 years old, my mother said, "You going trick-or-treating?" I said, "I'm a man." But I think at that time my voice said, "I'm a man." But I was 12 years old. It was time to grow up. It's time to do something. That's a mentality that's got to come back in the church. If it comes back in the church, then maybe we can get it in our nation. Let's break this verse down. We're going to be, I hope you'll participate with me tonight. We're going to have a lot of questions, and hopefully we're going to have answers. But the first thing we want to do is define the word child. I have finally discovered at this advanced age that before I can understand the Bible, I got to understand the words. Hello? The sentence is not going to be too comprehensible if I don't understand the words that compose the sentence. So the first thing I want to say is, and I want to ask you this, what do you think a child is? Da, 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 da. A who? An inexperienced person. That's a pretty good definition. What else is definition of a child?
Someone that's not grown up.
Inexperienced, not grown up. What else is... When you think of a child, what are some of the attitudes or behaviors that you ascribe to a child just because? Selfish. I wrote down self-centered. Foolish. Dependent. Can't do it by themselves. Got to have somebody else to lean on. Rebellious. Want it done their own way and want it right now. Dependent. Harold said that. Dependent. Anybody else want to offer? The biblical definition means a simple-minded person and immature Christian. These are the four things I thought of. There's more than four. It's just the four I thought of. One of them's already been said, self-centered. They live only for the moment with no thought of tomorrow or how today's actions or today's words are going to affect tomorrow's relationships. They are preference-oriented rather than vision-oriented. In other words, their thought process for the body isn't what's good for the whole body today and 5 years from now and 20 years from now. It's just the way I want it right now. And the fourth thing I put down, they're unwilling to learn. Here, honey, try this. I don't like that. Well, you've never tasted it before. You can't pronounce the words. You've never seen it. How in the world could you know you don't like it? I just don't like it. Well, let's all stand up and praise and worship. No, I don't want to. I don't like it. No, you can't make me. If God want me to worship, He'd tell me. He would have birthed me with a drum in my belly. I want to go to Sunday school. I don't care whether I learn anything or not. Or this famous one. I didn't get anything out of it. The only reason they come to church is so they can get something out of it. And that's the mentality of, like I said earlier, hey, God, aren't you glad you got me? Man, you got all of me. The adult understands that the community is bigger than the one and that everybody has needs. And it can't just be about them, it has to be about everybody. Church is full of children. Now I know why youth ministry is so important. I never did understand it. That's because 90% of the people ought to be in it. Bada bing, bada boom. A grown person cares about the others. A mature Christian is far more concerned about whether these people are blessed and whether they themselves are blessed, because they realize if they can be involved in these poor people's lives and sow seeds of blessing and seeds of joy, then they realize that that blessing will come back on them tenfold times. A mature person understands Matthew 6:33, which says, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and then all these other things that you constantly are asking for will be given to you anyways. Because the provision, the healing, the peace is in the kingdom. You don't have to ask for it. You just got to go in. The kingdom of God's like a general store. It's got it all. But to get it, you got to go in. God don't have a drive-through. And He don't have delivery. You got to go in. The mature person understands that. Mature person understands. Joyce Meyer said a wonderful thing this morning on the air. She said, your breakthrough don't come instantly. You only get a breakthrough when you're willing to go through. You understand? There's a brick wall, and I want my breakthrough. Well, I can't just stand there and pout about it. I got to go through. You've heard me say it in a different fashion. Nobody gets to the promised land except they go through a wilderness. Somehow we've been convinced that church ought to be sterile. We shouldn't get dirty. Our relationship with God shouldn't be painful. That it should be easy and predictable and all planned and properly laid out. Let me tell you, I think relationship with God's like going to the dentist. You got a cavity and it needs to be drilled out, but you sure don't want it drilled out. And when you go in the waiting room, all you can hear is but you got to stay, because if you leave, the cavity is going to get worse and you're going to get sicker. And you know that the one who's going to get rid of that cavity is doing it for your own good. And so therefore, you find a way to stay and see it through. The mature person understands this. It does not have to be explained. The baby, well, honey, you got to have your tooth worked on. Otherwise,